coward. We have a new world to conquer.
Leave me alone, please.
Hiding in the shadows. Hiding from who you truly are.
Oh. Hit the Pentagon! Hit the fucking Pentagon! Well, the day has finally come. Hazbin Hotel Season 2 is officially here. And at this point, I've basically become to VivziePop what content creator Danny and Ennen is to Dax's music videos. A fan of the channel even made an edit mixing the two of us together.
Excuse me, hello? Why are you acting like a bitch?
Which, fair, I guess. As much as I'd love to dodge the #1 hater allegations, unlike Danny and Ennen, who fully embraces the title, I've gotta be honest, Vivzie's back on her bullshit. So, once again, I'm putting the goblin mask on and firing up that VivziePop grill. Because just like Dax and some of his fans,
Strikes 12.
Hazbin Hotel still seems to never want to appeal to anyone outside of a very specific, corny demographic of edgy teenagers. And I would know, because I was one of those corny teenagers. Back in the early days of YouTube, when you could still find anime uploaded in 3 parts separately, I watched Elfenlied in its entirety. It was my absolute favorite show at the time. Between its haunting Lilium opening and over-the-top gore, it felt like I was watching something deep and artistic, something on par with Evangelion or Monster. It made me feel like a mature viewer, but in hindsight, it was just corny, violent, and melodramatic enough to perfectly feed my teenage brain rot. And that's why I get the appeal of VivziePop's work. I understand why it resonates with younger audiences who are drawn to its flashy chaos, and some of those who actually find some level of guilty pleasure enjoyment in watching the show. But I also see how, much like with Elfenlied, that same appeal risks burning out fast. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Over the last year, 2 fan bases stood out as some of the most passionate and divisive online: Smiling Friends and Hazbin Hotel. Both shows have become cultural talking points in their own ways, dominating discussions on animation forums, YouTube, and social media. Now, some might say shows like Space King make for a better comparison, but with Hazbin Hotel and Spindlehorse's growing mainstream appeal, it's hard to call them indie anymore.
You know who lives in this house? A great big phony!
While Smiling Friends and Hazbin might seem like polar opposites, one being a surreal comedy and the other being a musical drama with comedic elements, they actually share more DNA than you'd think. Both series place heavy emphasis on animation and comedic writing. Both came from humble online beginnings too, but where Smiling Friends has stayed true to its tone, only dipping into seriousness to enhance the absurdity of some jokes, like the Mr. Frog episode recently, Hazbin Hotel has doubled down on its most bizarre tendencies, to a point in which I generally feel like I'm living in a Groundhog Day style hell, forced to repeat the same criticisms for VivziePop's shows, with the same people saying I just don't get edgy humor, that no, shows like Panty and Stocking swear just as much, so saying she relies too heavily on swearing isn't good criticism.
Just a quick reminder that a like and a comment helps my videos tremendously in getting seen by the algorithm, so be sure to let me know below what you think. Do you think Vivzie's writing style is cringe, or am I just being too hard on her? Or not hard enough?
But in reality, both shows have entirely different impacts with their use of swearing, since Viv refuses to ease up on their usage in a way that would feel anything other than insanely forced and unnatural, in a, dare I say, painfully millennial way. Like again, I'm not gonna say that it's outright terrible because of the swearing, but it really puts people off. While I know it's hard for some people to believe, I genuinely wanted to give VivziePop the benefit of the doubt. When she mentioned BoJack Horseman as one of her biggest influences, I'd hoped that Hazbin Hotel might eventually pull a similar turnaround, where a show that in my opinion started out kind of rough found its footing through deeper character writing and tonal maturity. BoJack, after all, didn't truly click until season 2 if I'm being honest, when it began to further flesh out its characters and lean into its existential themes with absolute confidence. But Hazbin Hotel season 2 feels like more of the same. The same surface level drama, the same tonal whiplash, and the same shallow writing disguised as depth. It's a show afraid to experiment or grow, show, content with recycling the same blend of quirky musical faux edgy humor without ever asking why it exists beyond fan appeal. For someone who claims to be inspired by BoJack, VivziePop still hasn't shown that she understands what made that series work in the first place. Evolution. On the topic of evolution, on the other side, Smiling Friends, however, feels like a show driven by creative experimentation. It thrives on hiring online talent, trying new things, and never really fully giving in to fan service. Hazbin Hotel, on the other hand, often feels trapped by its own fandom, constantly pandering to an ever-growing audience of teenagers who see it as edgy or mature just because it spams swear words and practically screams at the audience, "This ain't your mama's cartoon." I mean, VivziePop isn't the only person who's been accused of this. I mean, just recently a director I actually really appreciate, Joe Begos, released a film under Eli Roth, and while his previous films were adored for their insane levels of style and over-the-top gore, this new film, Jimmy and Stiggs, fell prey to the same issues that Hazbin Hotel has. An over-reliance of style and an insane over-reliance on swearing. But again, this isn't a horror channel, but I felt that it was necessary to mention that I don't think that Vivzie is the only person who overdoes swearing in movies or television. But this is where the real divide truly begins. One show is evolving with its creators, while the other seems to be evolving to please its audience, or in this case, devolving. Zach Hadel has even said that one of the best compliments he's ever received for the show is when someone who doesn't watch the show says, "This was actually pretty good despite it not being their thing."
My favorite comments that are not the very nice ones, my favorite comments that are critical are the ones where people say, like, look, I don't like shows like this, usually. And maybe they say, I didn't even like the show, but this one part made me laugh. And the way I look at it is, if you can make somebody that goes into something to not like it, and they you know, get them with a laugh, or you make them enjoy one part of it, and some people do just hate it, that's fine, but it's gonna happen. But when I've seen comments, people say, like, look, this is my type of thing, but I enjoyed this, or...
It's a level of awareness to adapt to different audiences that allows Smiling Friends to be so beloved online. It's only been made more clear now that both shows started airing at the same time, where Smiling Friends is a show that, while airing, is consistently referenced online, to a point where random YouTubers I follow shoehorn in memes from the recent episodes. No one really does the same with VivziePop. Nothing of her shows have been shared in the same way that Digital Circus has, or anything from Smiling Friends. Except maybe the same tired joke of if X was written by VivziePop.
Cocksucker!
Now that's fucking funny!
I don't understand what part of that is funny.
It's funny because they're robots, but they said fuck!
I mean, I guess if you say so, but who's the target audience for that?
Millennials!
Once again emphasizing that everybody still feels quite critical of her writing skills. But arguably what's kept Smiling Friends culturally relevant is how it refuses to pander to trends, to fan service, or even its own audience's expectations. Its humor comes from sincerity, creative freedom, and not chasing shock value. Take Mr. Frog's episode, for instance. It could have very easily just been a hyper-edgy episode tripling down on the chaos of Mr. Frog that was known from previous seasons, relishing in the kind of edgy, hyper-violent humor Hazbin Hotel tends to for 10 uninterrupted minutes. Instead, it turns into one of the show's most introspective and emotionally resonant stories, ironically outdoing Hazbin Hotel's attempt at drama, where VivziePop might feel the need to throw a fuck in or a shit to make the scene feel mature or forcefully comedic, like in her recent episode.
You can call me Serpentious.
So clever! Like a serpent.
Telling us your story, my child.
Now we're not really buying this shit.
Shut your fucking mouth!
Smiling Friends finds its depth through simplicity and tone. The ending where Mr. Frog basically returns to nature in a Return to Monk style isn't just a meme reference, it's weirdly touching. It shows that Smiling Friends can deliver absurdity and emotion in the same breath without ever compromising its authenticity. And while Smiling Friends might on a surface level feel like a guys being dudes kind of show, despite Michael having proven through YOLO that he can write well-rounded female characters, it just focuses on being funny and genuine without ever feeling forced, or feeling the need to write in characters that they wouldn't have found funny in the first place just because the internet pressured them to. Although I still would like to see a Smiling Friends client be a woman, because I feel like that would be pretty fun, but for now, I'm not really complaining all that much. Where Hazbin Hotel, much like the weaker side of Tim Burton's filmography, often leans too heavily on its own whimsical edginess, Smiling Friends feels more like Tim Burton's Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure, playful, odd, and unpretentious. While Smiling Friends occasionally dips into moments of genuine introspection, it never loses sight of the chaotic absurdity that defines its identity. Whereas Hazbin Hotel and Helva Boss by extension, on the other hand, struggle to maintain a consistent tone, constantly shifting between drama, comedy, and musical spectacle in a way that to anyone outside of their devoted fanbase often feels unfocused and flat, or in less charitable terms, cringe. Ultimately, where Michael Cusack and Zach Hadel are both open to change and willing to challenge their audience, even if it risks backlash or means ending Smiley Friends on their own terms early, Vivzy Pop feels completely trapped by her own fanbase. She's become so audience captured that any genuine evolution in her writing or tone seems impossible at this point. Instead of growing as an artist, she's stuck to chasing the same approval that once made her successful, repeating the same creative mistakes over and over again, leading to jackasses like me making what feels like the same video over and over again too. And maybe that's the tragedy of Hazbin Hotel, a show born from passion and an individual's highly specific style, now held back by the very people who once championed it. Where Smiley Friends thrives on unpredictability and creative freedom, Hazbin Hotel feels like it's just trying to survive its own fandom and hatedom. And she seems to be heading down the same path as Tim Burton, endlessly repeating the same narrative, writing, and aesthetic patterns that, while highly marketable to mall-core teens, will ultimately lead her work into creative stagnation. That's all, guys, and I'll see you next week.